Welcome to One Piece Paneling Dojo, the show where we break down the paneling, visual storytelling, and other technical aspects of manga in new One Piece chapters. Now, there are a few reasons I'm starting this series. In general, I think that within the last few years, paneling has become a much hotter topic in manga communities, especially on manga Twitter. You see a lot more people talking about, oh, this page is well paneled, this page is doing interesting things to draw the eye, and all that's great, but I think that there is a tendency to look more at surface level aspects of paneling lately, and that's nobody's fault, but I think that that means we have a great opportunity to dig a little deeper in this show. And in particular, not everyone gives One Piece the credit it deserves and how much it does visually. One Piece is a very visual story, and more so than almost any other manga, I think One Piece understands that it is using a visual medium and everything it does should be incorporating visual aspects to help them hit harder. One Piece isn't really at its visual best, at least in my opinion. I would say I do fall into the camp who thinks that, maybe not early One Piece was the best, but in the middle, it had the perfect balance between clarity and detail. In more recent years, as Oda has gotten older, it doesn't look quite as clear as it used to. But the reason I really want to talk about One Piece's paneling is that I don't want the conversation to stop there. We can criticize how it's not as clear and the details are not as sharp as they used to be, but I think that doesn't mean we can't also look at how much it does do well, and if we sort of let a few shortcomings distract us from everything else, then we're just not enjoying the story as much as we could be. So let's jump right in and talk about the paneling in a few of my favorite pages from chapter 1091. So the first page I wanted to talk about was this one here, where from the start we should establish that we are starting at the top right and we're almost always going to be moving either to the left, down, or diagonally, as that's just the convention for how manga works. If we were starting up here, it'd be a Western comic and we'd be going in that kind of direction. But we are starting at the top right, and the thing that Oda almost always does is just gives us lines on the page to tell our eye where to go. So as we start here, we have, these lines, we have this line, and this sort of flow continues through the ship and into here, and it's just naturally drawing our eye to go in this direction. Although one thing I want to establish is that there is no strict rule of where your eye is supposed to go exactly. Paneling is not an exact science, and the eye doesn't have the self-control to literally follow along this exact line. The eye likes to explore a page. The eye might just, decide to check out here before following the flow here, or it might just want to look at, all these clouds. It's okay for that to happen, and the purpose of lines like this isn't that we have to follow them exactly, but it's to give a better sense of order and make it so it's something we can fall back on. And as you sort of stop trying to, focus on the little details and just let the flow of the image sort of invite you in, then more often than not, those lines are exactly what your eye is going to go along. And there's a few reasons for this that I might delve into later. But so we have this flow that sort of goes down like this, and then in a bit of an unusual move, up like this. And that's not just, the lines on the ships and this mouse thing's nose that we follow, it's also the composition of the image as a whole because we have this curved ocean. And one thing Oda loves to do is curve perspective. He loves to give us these kind of rounded grounds that just give the image a little more sense of impact, a little more sense of drama. There are so many action panels where somebody will be on the ground and it'll be a little curved to give a sense that, they're trying to find their footing. That's a really cool thing. And another thing that's happening because we have this curved perspective is that this image feels more complete, The ocean isn't really running off the side of the page. It isn't telling us, there's more out to the side that we're missing, but it's, going up parallel to the edges of the page and makes it feel more complete, makes it feel like there's not too much off screen that we're missing. Another great thing going on in this panel is that it gives us a sense of chaos. And you might think, well, of course there's a sense of chaos because there's a chaotic battle going on, but how do we know that it's a chaotic battle? Well, the reason we know that is because the way the page is set up. So think, we're going from right to left. We start with some ships on the marine side, then we have one of Vegapunk's sea beasts, then we have another ship, then we have another sea beast, actually this whole thing is a sea beast, then we have another big ship, then we have a beast, then we have more ships. And what this tells us is that the battle lines are not clear. Everyone is mixed in with everybody else. This is not an organized battle, but instead it's a mess of a bunch of different things attacking each other. Alternating like that is a great way to visually tell us that things are mixed in. And another way it gives us that sense of chaos and also just makes it feel a little more satisfying and, balanced is that everything is sort of facing in different directions. You know, these ships are facing this way, then this thing is contradicting them, this ship is then facing up, this thing is facing up and to the right, this thing is facing forwardish kind of, although we also have these mast lines that sort of go against those shapes, then this thing is pointing here, these ships are pointing here. And what this does is just give us a sense of variety. And so that's about all I have to say about this first page. We go up here, and then we don't really have anything that's drawing our eye down to where it goes next, but you don't always need that. As most readers will know, once you get through this panel, the next row at the right is where we go next. And what it does do is give us something to sort of draw us into that panel, because this guy, his head and his neck and the way that's all shaped, is aligned with the direction our eye is moving in as it comes down from over here. This is something that might just seem like an arbitrary decision, but actually has a lot going into it. For instance, imagine if this guy's head was angled like this, then it wouldn't change much about what's technically being shown in the page, but it just wouldn't feel as satisfying for our eye to travel down around here. Or also consider that this guy is on the offensive and thus he's leaning forward. If he was leaning backwards, then it wouldn't feel like he's trying to attack anyone, it might feel like he's trying to back away. And anyway, as our eye comes down here, it sort of curves down with his chins. We curve down and we come down to this speech bubble, which then leads us into this page, and then we have this nice line we can follow along the impact up to the next speech bubble. But the great thing about this page is that there's more, or this panel that is that there's more than one way you're allowed to read it, because you can also just start at the top right, and then you have this guy's attack, the impact, and then the thing that's being hit. And I think the great thing about having this composition that allows you to read it this way or this way is that, again, there's no one right direction for your eye to move in, and what Oda does instead is make sure that for more than one way your eye might go, it still gives you some sense of meaning. So the great thing is that happens if you start up here is that there's a rhythm to it. It's his fist, the impact, and then the thing that's moving. And we even have a little bit of distance between the thing that's being sent flying away and the impact. And the great thing that that distance does, and the fact that it's a little separated, is that space is time in manga, and this tells us that this thing is being sent flying, and that little distance also gives us a sense of speed. But if we go along it this way, well then we have this nice curved shape, and the thing about this curved shape is it's visually emphasizing the explosion. And this is something we're going to go deeper into later, but Oda loves circular compositions. Circular compositions enhance a sense of impact. They sort of claim space for whatever is at the center and tell us that that thing is significant and important. So as we follow this image, whether we're going up to this speech bubble or whether we're following the flow of the impact down this thing's eyes, we either end up here at the speech bubble or we follow the flash of light. And Oda loves using these flashes of light to direct the eye. I think he loves drawing chapters with pacifistas or with Kizaru in them, this chapter having both, because of how well he can use these little effects to enhance the image. We also can even say that we could follow it sort of down from here. Either way we're going, there's all these options, they're still leading us to the same place, which is along this line, which leads us straight to the next speech bubble. As we get here, our eye is drawn down to Doll and then across her leg. And again, we have this sort of action flow where each thing has its own section of the page. We have Doll, we have the impact, and then we have the thing she hits. And I think it generally just makes a page a little more satisfying if we have that kind of rhythm to it. Everything has its own space, it's clear what's hitting what. And as we follow her leg up, we once again end up at the next speech bubble because Oda is always leading us the next place our eye should go. And as we then go down from this speech bubble, what do we do but follow exactly the direction the Marines are moving in? And this is something that is going to show up everywhere, even though it hasn't been a ton on this page, which is that when our eye is moving in the same direction that the object or person on the page is moving, it makes the motion feel more real and impactful. And another thing that I really like about this panel is that we have a clear battle line. This is exactly the thing we didn't have up here, which is a ton of chaos. On this part, we have the island, the pacifistas, and their lasers all on one side, and on the other side, we have the Marines and their ships. And this tells us, in a very natural and visual way that's just incorporated into the composition of the panel, what the whole dynamic is here. One side is defending, one side is attacking. This side is higher up, which means that they're naturally falling down because what goes up must come down. The battle line is kind of slanted, which means this side is sort of taking space on the offensive. The next page I wanted to talk about was this one, as we begin the fight between Kizaru and Sentomaru. But the first thing of note isn't even the fight itself, it's the panel ellipsis. I badly wish that way more manga artists would use these panel ellipses, because these are such a convenient and natural way to tell us that we're transitioning somewhere else. It sort of makes the idea of a scene cut itself into a visual element of the page instead of just something that's implied between panels. And you might think, well, of course we're cutting somewhere else. I mean, this fight isn't happening where we were on the last page. But the thing that's great about this is that, sure, 90% of the time you might understand exactly what's happening, but there's that 10% of the time where you might get tripped up, and this happens to me all the time when I'm reading other manga. Sure, it might take you only a second to figure it out and get your bearings, but a smoothly made manga shouldn't even let you have that disconnect. It should always make it exactly clear what's happening, at least when it wants to. Now, as we get into the fight itself, our eye is moving in exactly the direction that Kizaru's kick is. Like I said before, when our eye is moving in the direction of the motion, that motion feels faster and more real. And that's especially important for a character like Kizaru here, because Kizaru is probably the fastest character in One Piece. If anybody needs the visuals to enhance the feeling of speed, it's him. And one of the clever things Oda does here is that he cuts to the fight right when the kick is already about to hit. It makes it feel like it happened too fast for us to even see that it was coming. We don't get a wind-up, we don't get a setup for this, it was already happening, again increasing that feeling of speed. Now, if Kizaru is defined by speed, then Sentomaru is defined by defense, and that's why we have this firm right angle for his elbow. He is putting up a stone defense, he is like a wall. Now imagine if instead of having that right angle, his elbow was like this. His defense would feel way more flimsy. You could see that the kick was ready to go right through him and he would fold like paper. And sure, Sentomaru does fold because he is not even close to as strong as Kizaru, but having this firm right angle tells us that at the very least, his defense was good. It was just overcome. And so as our eye moves along here, guided by the kick first, it then just nicely curves around with Sentomaru's cloak down again to the left and to the bottom, which is the direction that your eye typically moves in while reading manga. And once it ends up here, then we're in a perfect position to go straight down to the next panel. And there's more than one option here, because again, there's always more than one option. You can follow this line that's coming from the light, or you can maybe go with the speech bubbles and go reset to the start. But either way, what this page is doing is drawing your eye to the center. It's drawing your eye to the attack itself, because the attack is essentially the beat of this page. It is the event of this page. And here is where Oda really makes explicit something that he does in more subtle places elsewhere, which is that he loves circular compositions with concentric circles that emphasize a point at the middle, and he loves radial compositions with a bunch of lines radiating out from the center. And these can be a bit situational. Circular compositions are usually used more for impact, while radial compositions can be used like down here for the attacks that are emanating away, but it's case by case, and he's used both for similar purposes at times. But the point is, both of them focus things towards the center. And this center is literally the attack itself. The attack itself is an entity on the page, which is something that, again, a lot of manga authors don't realize they could be doing. They might just draw the fighters and the kicks and someone flying away, but they don't make the attack itself a visual element. And there's even another circular composition around Kizaru because we have this great swoosh of his kick, which for one thing is just meant to give his kick a sense of momentum as it's going up, but then it also aligns with his cloak and with the speech bubbles and even the SFX, and essentially tells us Kizaru is another important element of the page. He is also being emphasized. We have Kizaru, the attack, and then the explosion. The next interesting thing that's happening on this page is that we don't see Sentomaru, and that's not a lack of clarity, that is a very intentional choice, because the plot of the rest of this page is essentially a cliffhanger. It's asking us a question subconsciously, and that question is, what happened to Sentomaru? Is he okay? Is he down? Is he escaping? Where is he? That's why this smoke is all obscured and we don't see where his body itself is, and that's why in the next panels, we only see Kizaru in relative close-ups. We don't see the environment, we don't see what happened to Sentomaru, because it's very deliberately withholding that information from us so that it can resolve it on the next page. But before we get to the next page, our eye perfectly crosses over the next speech bubble, and this speech bubble could have been put here, which would be more traditionally at the start of the page, or at the start of the panel, since it's at the top right, but Oda understands that when we're going from the prior panel row, the first thing we actually see, the first part of the image, is on the top left of this panel. And after we end up here, now we get drawn down by, again, more of these flashes of light, because Oda loves using these, and he loves using these at slanted angles, because slanted angles are, first of all, just more interesting, and second of all, they draw the eye to where they should go. When we're following these, we end up naturally going down like this, and then following it up here, and we're at exactly where we should be on the next panel. And this also aligns with Kizaru's eye line. And the great thing about all these lines aligning is that we're essentially forming a slanted grid, and what that slanted grid tells us is that Kizaru is looking down, which is a really important thing for this fight to establish, because Kizaru looking down tells us that he is above Sentomaru, which has been something that's been happening in the last chapter too. Kizaru is above Sentomaru because he's the better fighter. It's not just because he can fly from his powers, it's part of the dynamic of the fight. Sentomaru is the underdog, Kizaru is confident. And when we're trying to withhold Sentomaru's position and don't actually want to show his position, and therefore we also can't show the environment, what we have to do is incorporate this slant into the image itself to give us that feeling of being above, even though we don't actually have a frame of reference. As our eye then goes up here, once again, these things are drawing us down, pointing us toward these beams of light, which again are moving in the direction that our eye is moving, down this way, enhancing their feeling of speed, and they form a radial composition, which is telling us Kizaru is sort of a point of power, that if he's able to radiate the composition of the image outward from him, then he has the power in the situation. Now, the final cliffhanger of this page is that Kizaru is attacking, but we don't actually see where his attack hits. And so we're going to wonder, as we go into the next page, where is Sentomaru? Are these attacks going towards Sentomaru? Is Sentomaru going to be okay? And now, in that next page, we immediately get that cliffhanger resolved. First of all, we see that Sentomaru is okay. We have this sort of harsh light against him telling us that Kizaru's attack is having an effect, and he's clearly sweating and angry and not looking well. But he's okay. And as our eye goes from these speech bubbles across his face and then into the next panel, then we start to get drawn up with Sentomaru up to the next speech bubble, because the whole image is drawing us in that direction. Again, we have that curved ground drawing us up, we have the shape of the smoke, and we even have the speech bubbles. This whole thing is telling us go from right to left. But again, we have more than one option, because if we instead go naturally to the top right of the panel, as one typically does in manga, then we're shooting down with speed along with the attacks, enhancing the sense of motion and enhancing the sort of explosion that comes out. The explosion is sort of our eye's reward for following these lines. It's telling us that, yeah, these lines weren't just taking us downward for no reason, they were taking us down to something that mattered. And so again, we have more than one option, and if we trace out the lines here, we actually have a triangular composition. And this kind of triangular composition is just a great way to give an image a little bit more identity and make it a little bit more cohesive to the eye. But we also have a circle going on, and there is a lot that an artist can do by mixing circles with triangles in their compositions. Blue Period fans know what I'm talking about, but when you have two shapes mixed together in an interesting way where they don't overlap too much, then we have a really interesting image. And the cool thing is, again, Oda isn't just curving the ground pointlessly, it's not solely for impact, it's also aligning us with the direction that our eye might be going, and it's also enhancing the circular composition that's being implied around Sentomaru. And the great thing about this circular composition and how much it's sort of aligning with on the page is that it's focusing us both towards Sentomaru and the explosion, which are the two most important parts of the page. It's sort of accomplishing two things at once, where we could just have a different composition where Sentomaru might be running here and the explosion might be over here, and that might work fine, but by doing it this way, we get both in one. And so as we sort of read up here and then slide down to this page, we end up at this axe. And the thing I love about these two panels of the axe is that there's a little visual story going on in just two panels and just very little information. And when I say story, I mean it in a very raw and simplistic sense. The great thing about One Piece fights is they always have a story to them, and that story isn't necessarily the character story, it's not necessarily like, a man trying to attack his former mentor, although that part is important. The story is more just a sense of progression and satisfaction to the things that the characters are trying to do. We could just have a simple back and forth of them hitting each other with attacks, but it's just a little bit more satisfying for there to be a concept like, Oh no, he doesn't have his axe, he needs to get it, it's not here on this page. Oh, we see his axe over here. Is he going to be able to get it? And then yes, he does get it, he gets the axe. And it might seem simple, but if we look at how another manga might handle this, you could easily imagine a manga sort of giving us a close-up of the character's face and having them think, oh no, I lost my axe in the explosion, I need to get it again, where is it? Oh, there it is, will I be able to get it in time? Okay, phew, I managed to get it, now I can attack him. There are a lot of manga that would write it that way, that would rely primarily on dialogue, and use more panels than we needed here to make something like that very explicit, but Oda looked at this concept for a little story within the fight, and he thought, how much do I actually need to convey it? All I really need is a shot of the axe in the ground, because when you see an axe in the ground, you already realize he doesn't have it, he could pick that up, will he be able to pick that up, and he's not there yet. And then we show he's grabbing the axe. We don't need a full page of it, we just need to see the action itself. And so a story is accomplished in so little. And now back to the order that we're reading the page. As we come down here, we follow the shape of the axe down, which leads us directly to the shape of the axe in this panel, which leads us directly along his arm, and I love this part. It leads us up the kanji on Kizaru's coat, up to the speech bubble, which then takes us down the attack. And the thing that's so genius about this is that Oda will use literally anything to draw the eye. Like, sure, this doesn't actually make it the most beautiful panel ever or anything, I'm not claiming that, but what impresses me so much is the resourcefulness. That Oda will stop at nothing, that Oda will always look for any tiny opportunities to add visual elements to the page that enhance it. Now, another thing I like about this so much is that the journey that is taking us along the page is an interesting one. You know, we're going at interesting angles, we're going up here, we're going down here, then down here, we're constantly changing a little. If I literally just draw out this composition, it's kind of a satisfying shape to it, even outside of the page itself. A lot of manga might give you a more simple Z layout that is technically functional, and it works, and it's just like, yeah, you go in this sort of S shape from panel to panel, but it's a little more boring, and I think something that very few artists are thinking about, but Oda is always thinking about, is giving us a sense of variety to how our eye is traveling along the page. We don't always need to travel along the page like this. We can have a more interesting shape. Back to this panel again, once we end up at this speech bubble and we're drawn down by the attack, and even these sound effects, we end up at this explosion. But the thing that's going on here is that this explosion stops before it reaches Sentomaru. In the panel above, even though he wasn't technically in the explosion itself, he's sort of in its section of the page, which is telling us that Sentomaru was sort of being dominated by that explosion, but now he is resisting it. And we get that feeling of resistance because we have a circular composition. It's kind of two circles here with the axe, but then we have the smoke and all of these effects going around him. He is claiming some space on the page. The circle is emphasizing him and his power, and is telling us, okay, he is fighting back. And now we travel along him and the axe and down here, and we go up to the next page. And this panel is important, and let's talk about why. One thing that Oda loves to do is have close-up panels right before an attack, and those might seem like filler. I mean, when we talk about One Piece's anime, we usually criticize the overuse of reaction shots to pad out time. But when you're using one deliberate reaction shot, then there's often a more specific purpose to why it's there. Now, the first of those is that in One Piece, how a character feels during a fight is as important as the fight itself. We need to see that Sentomaru is saying his intention. We need to see the resolute expression on his face. Because even though we might already know that from context, that context came from somewhere. That context came from the fact that Oda consistently reinforces that these things matter. If he never did this, then we wouldn't even know how much this means to Sentomaru, but how much it means to him is important, and I think it's easy to take that for granted. If we took these speech bubbles and just put them into this action page, sure, we might get the same information, but it's not really being treated with the same level of importance. They get their own panel, and that tells us that they are as important as the action. Now, the second reason that a close-up panel like this is important has to do with the concept called closure. Now, closure is essentially the concept that between two panels of a comic, your mind fills in what happens, whether it fills in emotion, whether it fills in an event, whether it fills in something that was said. Comics are a discrete medium made up of discrete images, and it's up to the human mind to piece together that these are actual things happening. And a basic usage of closure is that we see someone about to do an attack, and then we see the attack. But I've often found that if it's just that, the attack can still feel a little fake. Your mind still sees that, okay, these things aren't actually moving. And the great thing about an in-between panel like this, that's a close-up, tight shot that isn't showing us the attack, is that it tells us, okay, there is a moment in time in between the wind-up and the hit itself. And because we don't see the attack in that moment of time, it gives the brain a better opportunity to fill in that the motion is happening. It's a lot easier for my mind to imagine that the motion is happening in this panel, just that we don't see it, than it is for me to imagine that the motion is happening in the break between panels. And honestly, that might make me sound a little bit insane. I'm sure some of you are listening and thinking, that's total nuts, what are you talking about? Obviously he's moving, we see that movement implied in the next panel. And that's fine, but I do think that this kind of subconscious factor to how the brain takes in a panel is actually pretty interesting, and I think we should give it some thought. Now, going back to the order of the page, we go down these speech bubbles, we go to this speech bubble, and then we curve right through with the attack. Again, our eye moving in the direction that the attack is moving gives us a sense of speed, and by giving the attack itself and the space it occupied a shape, we just generally make it more interesting and more clear that the attack is what happened. For instance, just imagine that Kizaru didn't split himself in half and he more just leaned backwards. Then we wouldn't have all of this empty space here that implies the attack, and even if Sentomaru was in the exact same position with his axe like here, if we didn't have this shape where the swoosh occurred, then it would be a lot less clear that he just swung his axe. It would take the brain a little bit longer to piece it together and make it a little less satisfying to read. But because Kizaru is up here, and because he's separated his body, the attack itself is a space on the page. And that conveys not just that it happened, but it missed. The attack itself is not a thing, it is emptiness. Now, another thing I like a lot about this panel is that Kizaru essentially happens first in it, because we are going from right to left. This is before this. And this is a technique that you would see happen a lot in Dragon Ball being one of the biggest influences on One Piece. If you have a character dodge and they're happening first in the page, then it makes it feel like they dodged before the attack even happened. Whereas if you have the character dodge and they're second on the page, like if Kizaru's body was up here and the axe was here, then it would feel like Kizaru barely dodged, like Sentomaru's attack was actually pretty fast and Kizaru was desperately trying to avoid it. By having it first, we again maintain the dynamic of the fight, that Kizaru has the advantage, that Kizaru is playing around, and that while Sentomaru is trying hard, Sentomaru is the underdog. And this order to the attacks is also pretty important because it actually matters to the technical side of the fight. Now, I don't want to delve into this too deeply because if you're watching this video, you probably understand One Piece power mechanics, but essentially, Kizaru is not just relying on his Logia intangibility here, he is actually separating himself in advance of the attack, and this is because Sentomaru has Haki and the Logia intangibility alone wouldn't work. And the great thing about that is that, again, that's incorporated into the image. We see Kizaru first, we get the sense that he dodged first, and so we don't need a long, overcomplicated explanation of how Kizaru dodged it. We don't need to have Kizaru think in his head with a speech bubble, oh yeah, I managed to get out of the way in time because I'm faster, and that sure was dangerous because he has Haki. We don't need that, because we just know from the visuals that he dodged in advance. Now, after we go through here, I think that it is a little bit of a shame that once again we don't have something drawing us down here. It's nice when there is something like that, but you can't always manage it. But as we do come down here, we reach this speech bubble, and then the direction our eye is moving in is exactly along the line that Kizaru's head is tilted at, and then it goes exactly along his glasses and down his eye line, straight into Sentomaru's eye line, while this at the same time is maintaining the sense that Kizaru is above Sentomaru, that he is looking down, Sentomaru is looking up. Now, skipping past the flashback, we end up at Sentomaru attacking again. This is another nice page where there's just a little bit of clear visual space, the attack is overlapping Kizaru a bit, but it's still clear what's happening. We have the call out, the attack, Sentomaru, and we also have the circular composition with all of this sort of warping around the attack. You know, this would look much worse if the speech bubble was here overlapping the circular composition, because then it wouldn't be as clear. But we have this clear circular composition, which is implying power. But this isn't even the largest circle on the page, as you might notice down here, which is helping emphasize that even though Sentomaru has some power, it's not enough to dominate. And now as our eye travels along the arm, and then along this arm, and over to this panel, then we can go down to the next row. And you might think there's a problem with the next row, because there's again nothing to draw our eye over here before it goes over here, and what's most likely going to happen is that our eye is going to see some of what's happening over here before it actually reads these panels. But the thing is, that's okay. Oda knows that, and that's why these panels are just close-ups. Close-ups, which, as I mentioned, are important, they do need to exist, but they don't need to actually be read before this happens, because there's no continuity here. We don't need to understand anything that's happening here in order to understand this. It's not like this panel has, like, Kizaru explaining what his attack is, or it's not like Kizaru threw a bomb and this was the panel where his bomb was taken out. It's only a close-up. The physical continuity of the page can skip right past this. It's that Sentomaru did an attack, Kizaru does an attack back. And what that means is that your brain can essentially take in that the attack happens without needing to see these first and without ruining these panels, because your brain is still then going to read these and understand that what it just read is contextualized by these. Now that might sound a little bit confusing, I'm not sure how clear I made that, but it's something you see a lot in double pages by Oda, because I'm sure we've all seen pages where there's a big action happening here, but then we have some reaction shots here. And so what I want you to think about is, next time you see one of those pages, when you turn the page, are you already ready to see this thing? You know, even though these panels might have some setup, are they vital for understanding this, or did the page before already set that up? And this is just a mini version of that, even though it's not a full page spread. Once we've seen this, we're already ready to see this, and this is just context that is okay if we experience a couple seconds later instead of a couple seconds earlier. Anyway, once again, we're still maintaining this sense that Kizaru is above Sentomaru. Even in this page, Kizaru is on a higher point in the page, and sure, you might think that's obvious because Kizaru is incredibly tall, but this attack could have been organized such that Sentomaru is up here and punching down. Instead, he's punching up because he's still the underdog. And here, in a very simple way, Kizaru is just being drawn on top, because Oda doesn't just think about the physical layout within the world, he's thinking about the layout on the page. And so as we go down here, we read this, we go along the eye line, we end up being drawn up by this building, and we could go along this here and sort of outline the shape of the explosion and get a sense of its size, but we could also go up here and get our eye drawn down by the laser directly towards the explosion. Again, when Oda draws your eye, it's also going to reward you for following it. It doesn't just put a line for no reason, it's drawing you to something that's important, so you know that you can trust it. And the really cool thing about this panel is that once again we have this curved perspective, and in 99% of panels, this perspective would be ridiculous. I mean, look at this. The ground is parallel to the building. This should literally be at a right angle from it. I just drew a very poor right angle, but, you know, this is how these are actually laid out against each other, but it's so curved that they're parallel to each other. And this is ridiculous, but it works because they're enhancing the circular composition. They're bending around the explosion. They're emphasizing this impact. And by having this impact emphasized, and by having this whole panel warp itself around this explosion, it makes it feel all the more powerful in a way that it wouldn't if this was all, you know, flat perspective. Now we're going to skip ahead a few pages. There are actually a lot of really cool pages that I'm not talking about here because I don't really want to dissect the entire chapter. That takes a while and it might make me more likely to run into copyright issues. So we're going to keep it to just a few, and I want to talk about the last page in the chapter. But there are some great ones that I missed, so if you want to comment about what page you really liked, or maybe some cool details on a page that I didn't talk about, I would love to hear about it, because as much as I love to talk about and analyze paneling, I definitely don't notice everything, and I'm not perfect. Now, as we go ahead from this final page, Kizaru has already beaten Sentomaru, and he's sort of just waltzing around the island. The first thing we see is that Kizaru is looking at something. but we don't see what he's looking at. It's cut off here, but we do have a lot of visual space to the side of him to emphasize, something is in front of him. If his face was up here, then we might not get that sense. It would feel too complete. And then we get this shot of somebody's feet. And if you're turning the page to this, you already know that Luffy's here. Again, your eye is going to see the main thing on the page before it follows the continuity exactly. But that's okay, because the point of these isn't literally to set up something that would get spoiled by seeing this. It's more to just provide a sense of tension. I think that when a person reads manga, there is a few seconds, maybe even 10 seconds, where their brain is still constructing the image, and seeing things a little out of order doesn't actually spoil things. Like if you just see that Luffy's attacking here, and then you see this buildup of tension, then your brain doesn't think, oh no, I ruined that tension. Your brain just kind of constructs that there is this gradual buildup, and then Luffy attacks, and it appreciates that even though it didn't technically read it in order. And that's great because this buildup of tension is really good. We have Kizaru sees something, and then we see, okay, he sees a person, who is it? And then we see that it's Luffy. And again, this is all visual. We don't need to be told directly, even though we did have a little bit of dialogue that Kizaru saw somebody, and he's wondering who it is and if he's going to have to fight, and then they attacks. We get the same experience that Kizaru is having of confusion, and then, oh, somebody's here, and then, oh crap, he's attacking me, just from the visuals. And another great thing about this attack is that it doesn't have a wind-up. Luffy goes from standing to directly attacking, and this is accomplishing a couple of important things. First of all, it makes it feel fast. Oda will consistently have wind-up panels and close-ups in between, and then a big impact if he wants to convey an attack has power. But when he wants to convey that an attack has speed, then it's very important to skip those things, because if Luffy is able to just go from standing to already attacking, that means it happened quickly. And that is especially important to the narrative of this chapter, because Kizaru is one of the fastest characters in One Piece, and thus it means a lot that Luffy is on the level where he can blitz him. Kizaru reacted, he's defending here, but Kizaru is not attacking before Luffy could get his attack in. And the second reason that this is great is that it also tells us that Luffy is not going all out yet, which sure, we know he's not going all out because he's not in Gear 4 or much less Gear 5, but again, it's not just the plot, it's not just the things we already know, it's incorporating those things into the visuals. And now, as our eye sort of goes along here, these two are basic, but once we're here, our eye is perfectly drawn down to the impact. Let me draw that better. It's drawn along the hockey line, because the hockey line is not just there to tell us that this attack is powerful, it's there to help draw the eye, because Oda will use whatever he can and whatever he wants to draw the eye. And then after it ends up here, it's drawn down Luffy's leg, and then drawn down these lines, and down Kizaru's leg, all the way to where we want to be next. It's a beautiful flow. But what's also happening here is that we have a triangular composition, because again, building your compositions around basic shapes like this can make them more satisfying to look at and make them more clear visually. And what a triangle is telling us is that Luffy is on the offensive, because a triangle is a very sharp image, and this is in fact a pretty sharp triangle with this angle here. It's not a regular triangle, but in addition to this triangular composition, we also have a little bit of a circular composition implied by the shape of Kizaru's body and the lines along his suit, because again, Oda will use anything to contribute to the composition. And so essentially we have a kind of mix of the concentric circles and the radial stuff, in that on this side, we have all these radial lines coming in to this point telling us this is a point of power, everything is going toward this point. And then on this side, Kizaru's whole body is curved like this to tell us, when this impact hit, it had an effect. These are essentially kind of waves emanating out from the point of impact in this direction. But despite that, Kizaru is not down because we have another firm angle here. It's not quite a right angle on the page, but it's telling us that, he is not folding. He has blocked it. And so this is probably my favorite page in the chapter, just because of how much all these little things about the shapes contribute and come together. We have the radial lines, and we have the sort of curved lines coming away from that core point, and we have the shape language going on, and we just have great visual elements used to direct the eye. There's so much going on, and I hope that you found this a little bit educational to learn how much goes into a manga page, and that when we say a page like this has great paneling, it's a little bit more than just, oh, we can see both characters and how they're attacking each other. where it's more about all the things that are drawing the eye, all the things about the shape language and visual elements that are enhancing the sense of the attack, and even the visual storytelling of how we are essentially in the same state as Kizaru in this moment of, somebody's there, who is it? Oh, it's Luffy. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you like and subscribe for more.